This is Margaret McCraw. You're listening to Business Life Works, the show that guides you and coaches you on creating a wonderful business, a wonderful workplace environment, and a wonderful personal life. Today we're here with Dawn Mahan. Dawn, you with me?
I am.
Great. Well, Dawn is our guest today, and she's going to be helping us get a clear concept on how to create a healthy work culture that actually gets results. I love that idea. So, Dawn, let me give a little bit of information about you, because now more than ever it's important to be intentional about creating a culture that not only cares about people but actually gets results. So let's talk a little bit about why it is so important to have a culture that gets results now more than ever, especially with the pandemic and dealing with that. So many people working from home. Some people think culture doesn't matter because, hey, they're working from home, but we both know that is not true.
That's right. And I believe now more than ever it's important because when people are working from home, they're physically disconnected from the office. So they start to feel physically disconnected from the work and from their colleagues, where before, when they were going into the office, you know, they would interact with colleagues, maybe at the coffee machine, walking down the hall, say hello, give them a smile. And now it's completely different. You know, we're Zoom warriors. We're interacting only in two dimensions with people if we even have our video on. So many people are feeling disconnected. Some people are loving working from home, but many people are really feeling the stress of all the things happening around us, especially in America. There's more than just the pandemic that's stressing people out. And so having a culture where people can feel connected and valued for the work they do, even if they're working from home, is really important.
It is important. You know, I was talking to a woman, a neighbor the other day who has a very high-level position with the company, and she said she's been working from home since March, and she had to go it was her first time of having to go into the office, not for a regular work schedule, but for a meeting, a face-to-face meeting that was going to be held on a Monday. And she said, you know, this seems so bizarre, but she said, I feel so anxious about going into the office. She said she loves working from home, and going into the office, she just made her very nervous and anxious, and she'd been worrying about it for several days. And this is a person who's, again, put together quite well and is in a position of authority, but somehow it kind of rocked her boat. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, I've heard similar stories. And for the people who can't work from home, there are certainly jobs like that, you know, there's extra stress in keeping social distance and being aware all the time. How far away are you from someone? Wearing your mask. I mean, I forget to put my mask on sometimes if I'm going into a store. It's just not something I'm used to yet. You know, and also sanitizing your hands and what you're touching. So there's a lot of anxiety for people around, am I doing the right thing? Am I staying safe? Because if your friend has a family and then she brings something home, you know, there's how she would react to it, but there's also often anxiety about how someone at home might react, especially if there's someone in the family that's high risk.
So let's talk about, you know, the culture that's toxic, and then let's talk about a healthy culture, because I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I have my thoughts from my own consulting work in terms of a toxic culture. So I'm curious to see if we're on the same page of what toxic looks like and feels like, in your opinion.
Yeah, I've definitely, unfortunately, experienced toxic cultures, and I'm afraid many of us have. So to me, when I step into a toxic culture, I can really feel it. And it feels like I'm trudging through a thick swamp, you know, scared at what might jump out and bite you. And, you know, when people are experiencing a toxic culture, they often fear going into work every day. So you just talked about your friend. She was feeling anxiety and some fear about going into work. because of the situation, right? And imagine feeling that if she had to feel that every day she was going into work. It ends up haunting you in your sleep, and when you're there, you're very stressed out. You have a hard time concentrating on the job because basically you're busy looking over your shoulder for, beasts that might get you. So people feel physical symptoms when they're in a toxic culture. I've seen, I had my mother once was in a toxic culture, and she said she physically would come home and vomit after work. That's terrible. And I've also worked with organizations where it seemed like everybody was getting hurt or sick. So if that's happening, then chances are there's a toxic culture.
That's a good point. I can definitely relate to that. And I think, what's key, though, what we all have to look at is how do we contribute to a toxic culture and how do we contribute to a healthy culture? Are we contributing to it in any way by being passive or by being aggressive or by being passive-aggressive? Are we making a contribution? Because if we're there contributing to the work, somehow we're part of the masses. And so have we fallen in line to accept maybe a fear-based controlling environment because we don't want to lose our job? Or have we somehow found a way to appropriately communicate our thoughts and feelings to perhaps somebody who's open to the feedback? We have to look at that, don't we? And do you have suggestions for people in terms of self-evaluating what kind of culture they're in? Is it toxic? And then the other question would be, what can they do about it? Do you have suggestions for people in terms of self-evaluating what kind of culture they're in? Is it toxic? And then the other question would be, what can they do about it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. We can only take care of ourselves, truly, right? So certainly I love what you're saying there. And to me, it becomes obvious if you're having physical symptoms, but hopefully you can catch it before it gets that far. But if people are feeling physical symptoms, like your friend who's so anxious, that's really a wake-up call, I think. Your body's telling you to pay attention to me. Something is wrong, right? And something needs to change. So the first thing I think is really, sitting quietly with yourself and asking yourself some questions. Why do I feel this way? What is happening? What can I do about it? Can I replay that scenario in my mind and come up with a better way to react, for instance? And then maybe experiment with that. So the next time it happens, and it likely will, you have a plan. And, I am a planner. I am a project management expert. So, I like to have plans, but everybody can have a plan for, let's say your boss said something to you that you didn't like and you really got your back up about it. Well, if that person does that again, what would you do? Can you replay that in your mind and say, how would my best self react to that next time? And give yourself a break and then try it. Experiment with it. And say, okay, it's my best self's time to respond. How is my best self going to react? Try it and see what happens. If it works, great. And if it doesn't, try something else.
Right, try something else. So learn from the experience.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems to be the key for all of us. The one thing I love about talking about culture and thinking about workplace culture is that all of us tend to bring our unresolved issues from our family life into the workplace. So we do get a mixed bag of emotions and energy and all kinds of things. It's quite a wonderful playground to learn new skills, isn't it?
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly with that.
and this sounds kind of weird to say this, not to take it too seriously, because we do need to take it seriously. We do need our jobs, right? We do need our workplace. We do need to be productive. At the same time, we have to be able to almost, and this is my opinion, I love talking about this with you, but in my opinion, having been in toxic cultures, the way I found myself even thriving in them was that I stood back as an observer, almost like an observer, and I just did my job. And when I thought I could communicate to somebody who was open to feedback, I know I would do that. And if I felt they didn't want to hear it or there was going to be really negative repercussions, I just sat back and I worked on my job, and I still kind of observed. Because if I didn't, I would start to become part of the drama. And that is the worst thing I felt I could do And that would hurt me more than anything. That would make me sick. That's what I feel, think of the days. It's been a long time since I've worked for somebody else, but having worked for somebody else, that's what I felt. I had to step out and be a little bit of an observer to see what was really going on, look at the drama, and see how can I contribute and do my job and meet my commitments here, but not become part of this. That's a challenging question to ask ourselves, isn't it?
It's huge, and it's perfect. I love how you said that. If we can become observers, that is a great gift that we can give ourselves and the culture, because then you're not playing into those games that happen. I worked with a government, major city government once, and they used to talk about the big P politics and the small P politics. And politics are often at play at work. And I find that to be, as a consultant, I'm definitely built more for consulting because I don't have a lot of tolerance for that. So it's wonderful as a consultant, as you know, when you can walk in and you can see things clearly and you can give your best advice because that's what they're asking you to do. And, and you don't have to play those, let me call them games, right? Because that's what they seem like to me, at least. But when you're in it, and I've been an employee, it's been a long time also, but, you have to take care and you have to understand what is happening in this environment and how best can I contribute and also keep myself, let's say, safe.
Right. If we don't give that attention that it deserves, then I think, we're just going to somehow contribute, even if it's by the fact that we are making ourselves sick and we can't be productive, we're upset, and the word vibration comes back again in terms of we're sending out a negative vibration by not dealing with anything, not processing it.
Yeah, and I do think this is part of the reason why some people are really enjoying working from home. If they were in a toxic culture or if there were politics at play and that's not their thing, then now they're at least removed from that part and they can do their work. And so I feel like some people, that's part of the reason why, and that there's going to be a big shock, like with your friend, when it's time to go back into the office, should that happen.
Right. No, I think it will be. This was only for a meeting she was going back in. For a meeting, not to go back. She was still going to be working from home. But she was very open about the anxiety, days before the meeting. She just had that on her mind. And I think a lot of people are dealing with that, and that as a society we're going to have to deal with that too when the time comes that people return to the office setting.
Right, and I hope that people around your friend are being compassionate about how people may be feeling about going into the office.
I think from what you shared, it's probably not that kind of situation. I think it's, people are not at this point all that sensitive to, or even if they are, they may not have the communication skills to really even open up and say, how did you feel coming in today? It's been a long while since we've been at the office. Feels kind of odd, doesn't it? Or whatever. Just open the door to the discussion, right?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
Yeah.
thing of communication. If you think of culture, I mean, how much has to do with communication? We build this drama because we're not communicating. We make assumptions, and we can easily get into saying, well, I can't do this. I'm not empowered to give anybody feedback because they wouldn't want to hear from me. We start assuming all these things without asking. And, and there's lots of reasons sometimes for that. Perhaps we've observed negative repercussions from somebody who did speak up or whatever. But we do have to really evaluate ourselves and evaluate our situation, step back, so we don't start doing things that are unhealthy to deal with the unhealthy culture.
Yes. Yeah, don't play their game, right? Don't get sucked into it.
Yeah, right. So let's take a moment now. We're going to be taking a break in just a minute, but I want to start thinking about the healthy culture. And, we get into a description of that. We are going to take a quick segment break, but when we get into the discussion, I'd like to know if you've ever been part of a healthy culture and what that's about. But let's take a quick segment break. We'll be back in a moment with more Business Life Works, speaking to Dawn Mahan today about her experiences. This is Margaret McCraw, host of Business Life Works. We're here talking with Dawn Mahan today regarding creating a healthy work culture that gets results. Dawn, so let's talk about what a healthy culture looks like and feels like.
I love walking into an engagement with a new client and feeling that healthy culture. I mean, you can really feel it, just like you can feel a super toxic culture. So to me, it feels lighter, it feels more fun, and it feels like people are enjoying their time at the office. So what it feels like to somebody that's working in it is they look forward to working that day. Most days, maybe not every day, but most days. They feel valued for their unique gifts, and they feel like they have some room to breathe. They're able to get stuff done and feel good too.
That's a good point, yes. And, you might even see laughter, right? The people are having a good chuckle at work.
That's the best, I think. That's the best sign. I work with a gentleman who, just last night we were prepping something, and he started laughing. He's this great, wonderful laugh also. He's like, me, I like to laugh. I like to have fun at work. And he does, and he makes everybody else have fun because he has this nice, lighthearted style about him, and he's a great worker. I mean, he can pump out work like nobody else, right? But he also has fun, and I think there's a lot of lesson in that, to not take yourself and the work, like you said earlier, a little too seriously. You can have fun, too. There are definite ways to do that.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of some experiences I've had in my own consulting work and how the whole thing with culture, the leader does kind of guide the culture, but there's a lot of opportunity for the frontline workers, usually, I believe, to impact the culture. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, where you've seen maybe the leadership is, I don't know, maybe they're controlling, critical, whatever, but the frontline staff have been able to help a leader see that they could do things differently and build more rapport and productivity would be more effective. Any thoughts on or any experiences where frontline staff have been able to really impact the higher levels of authority?
Well, that's a good one. And I'm rolling through the Rolodex of all of the sort of, let me call them evil executives that I've worked with. And I certainly, one gentleman comes to mind where he was completely in the wrong culture. He was an executive who had been in banking, really hardcore banking, big bank kind of culture. And he ended up as an executive in a nonprofit. And this nonprofit, all these people at the beginning of this, they're lovely people. They believe in their mission. They're wonderful. Well, I was brought in because he looked around and he didn't see anybody that he trusted to run a project. And this was many, many years ago. That was one of the bet the company type projects, right? It really had to go well. And what happened was I started to see that he started to infect this organization with fear. And so what I tried to do, and I was very young at that time, and I didn't know any better, maybe that was a good thing. What I noticed was, once in a while he would do stuff to, poke people. And once he did it, and I saw it, and I knew the 5 things that were going to happen that were not going to be good for the project afterwards. And they started to happen. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go talk to him about this. And luckily, as a consultant, as you know, you have to get fired twice. Your client has to fire you, and then your consulting company would have to fire you. So, there's a little bit of buffer, maybe a little bit more confidence that goes with that. I don't know. Like I said, I was young.
Maybe.
So I walked into his office, and I said, could we have a chat? And he said, sure, what's on your mind? And I said, well, this is what I understood happened, but I'm sure you didn't mean it that way. I'm guessing he misinterpreted you because if he didn't, this is what's going to happen next. And that's not going to be good for the project and the results you want. So I'm quite sure it was this other thing, and is that right? Am I getting that right? And he was like, oh, yeah, that's true.
You gave him an out.
I gave him an out, and that's part of, with the evil leaders, sometimes you need to give them an out to save face.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily do it consciously at the time, but that luckily worked well for me and for the project. And then from then on, when he had a problem, he would come directly to me, and I was able to shield the team so they could do their work and create our project team culture, which ended up being wonderful inside this organization that was really started to operate under fear. So that middle manager person, whether it's a project manager or a middle manager, if they can create that relationship with that, toxic executive, let's say, that, shields their team from the work, it's an amazing gift to that team. And then the team can have fun and get work done and do great things.
Interesting. That's a good point. And here you were in a position where you could take the risk, a little bit more risk than maybe some people felt they could take.
Right.
But he was receptive.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Now, how about if somebody isn't receptive? Any suggestions? If they've taken a risk to talk to somebody in authority about, how they're perceiving the organization, how it's impacting them or the project. Any thoughts on that?
Well, again, I'm going to say have a plan. So, I say bravo for having the courage, right? We need more people to have the courage to go in and speak to the person. So I would think about, what is the message, what is their communication style, and if you know more about communication styles, we teach that, I'm sure, many folks have gone through some of those things, but the more that you understand your own personal communication style and the communication style of the person that you're speaking with, the better you can plan your communication so that they can hear it in the right way. That's the first thing. So in difficult conversations and serious conversations like this, I feel it's best to have a plan.
Okay. I think that's a very, very good point, and you're going to approach it having thought it through very carefully. Let's take a quick break. We have to pause for a moment. We'll be back in just a moment with more Business Life Works. This is Margaret McCraw, host of Business Life Works. We're here today talking with Dawn Mahan, And Dawn, you have such an experience as a consultant working with organizations and helping them create a great culture. Let's talk a little bit about some things. I know you've spoken at the Project Management Institute chapters around the world, and I'd like to know if you could share some of the tips that leaders can implement immediately to help cultivate a healthy culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the talk that I do for the PMI chapters is a really fun one. I delivered in a rapid top 10 countdown style like David Letterman. So I'll give you number 10. Number 10 is mind your face. So let me explain. So the first time I was in London and took the tube there, I saw the warning to mind the gap. It seemed silly to me to have to remind people that they could get hurt by the gap between the platform and the train, and it seems a little silly to remind people to mind their faces too. But have you ever worked with someone who looks like they're sucking on a lemon all the time?
Mm-hmm.
I sure have, right? I sure have.
Yes.
And so if all we did was pay attention to what our faces are doing, we'd be a much more approachable person. Even if the person can only hear your voice, like right now, they can usually tell when you're smiling or if you look like you're sucking on a lemon. So, given all the contortions that our faces can do, I say use your face for good and make it do some good things, and the other people will feel it. So that's definitely something people can do right away is mind your face.
Wow, that's a good point. That's a good point. Give us a few more of your tips that you've shared with the leaders, how a leader can implement immediately.
Sure. So a friend of mine who's a general manager of a super fancy hotel, meaning he's an expert at making sure fancy people feel at home and are taken care of, he tells his daughters that it costs nothing to be kind. And I think that's great advice, especially now. We don't know what people are going through. I've spoken to some people and they said, oh, my family member got COVID, right? What kind of stress are they under?
Right.
There are a lot of stressors, and we just never know what someone's going through. So it's amazing when you're kind, it's free, but it pays you back. Mm-hmm. So also when you're kind to someone, they're kind back to you. And I'm not talking about being a pushover. I'm just talking about using your face and smiling at people and helping them feel valued as a human being. So being kind to means saying, I love your idea, or how are you feeling today, and actually listening and caring about how the person is feeling today. And if they're not feeling great, maybe even asking if there's anything you can do to help. So I love Maya Angelou's advice. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Right. That's a good point. And yet at the same time, we have to always remember that nobody can really make us feel anyway, that we have to take charge of our feelings, right? That's
a perfect reminder. Absolutely.
Because we become a victim very quickly once we tell somebody that they made us feel a certain way. To me, it was very freeing when I realized and became aware that nobody could make me feel a certain way. It meant I no longer had to be a victim to anything.
Yeah, that realization came way later than it should have for me in my life also.
Right. Because, if we were taught these things as children, it would just become second nature, and we wouldn't go through quite the trials and tribulations we go through when we're older. But that's a very powerful thing. But it's true. People know how they feel around you, and they either gravitate toward you or they gravitate away from you. And I think all of us need to start to pay attention to that. Not that we need to be people pleasers, but just to tune in to our relationships and how we are around others. Seems like we take on sometimes the roles of the people in our families, That's one of the things I've observed, that we can take on the role of people who interacted with us, and it's not even necessarily things that we liked, but next thing you know, we're doing the same thing that we're, used to or were comfortable with, or that we were surrounded with as children growing up. We can bring that into our work environment.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not always conscious. So
right.
when someone can employ your advice from earlier, which is to be the observer, then there's also the observing of yourself, like you were talking about, which is so powerful. Like, that didn't feel good. What did I just do? How would my best self maybe respond instead? Let me try that. So I agree.
Right. You know, I remember being a new manager in a hospital environment, just trying to break into my role in that organization, into a department where I was leading it. It was very challenging. But, you know, let's talk about the role of food, because I remember when I would bring things to staff meeting, it just lightened up the environment. People became more comfortable. It softened things in the environment. And I did that. It wasn't something I would normally have done because, you know, I was kind of all business. But I think somebody suggested it to me, maybe a friend, and I would pick up some muffins or something, and it just softened everything. Like, people became more open. They smiled more. It wasn't the food as much. I'm sure the food was part of it, but it was just also, it was like a gift to them. I was appreciating them. And that's what you started this whole conversation with, is a healthy culture is where people feel valued. And whatever that might mean, that was a small gesture to bring muffins to a staff meeting, but it helped people to feel valued.
Absolutely. And it also, food is also reminds us that we're human. So that's one of my other tips, is that, you know, we're human. Be human. You know, people don't want to be treated like robots. They're not robots. So,
right.
You know, as much as we want to get results from people, if we start to treat them like robots, they're going to rebel because they're not robots. They're humans. And when you bring food, you know, when there's food involved, it's a human thing. Humans eat food. So I think there's a connection there. It's just my own hypothesis.
No, I think it's a good point. It really broke the ice where we could then begin over time to work on our relationships. And this whole thing is about relationships. Culture is about relationships.
Yes. You were talking before about bringing those family relationships that you have into the workplace. And so that can be good or not so good.
Yes, it can be both. Well, let's take a quick segment break. We're going to come back. This is our last segment, I believe. Goodness sakes, it's going fast. I want to be able to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about relationship tips to build a healthy culture. We'll be back in just a moment. This is Margaret McCraw, host of Business Life Works, and we are here today talking with Dawn Mahan about creating a healthy work culture. Dawn, before we go any further, do you have anything in particular you'd like to let our listeners know about? Do you have a book out? You certainly have a website. You have a course, a projectgurucourse.com, I see is your domain name. Anything you'd like to share before we finish up this segment?
Thank you. Yes, I love Projectland, and I love helping people navigate Projectland, because projects are very different than operations. And I've found that even if people have been working in operations and become very successful for many, many years, if they get in on a project, they can do things to sabotage that project without even knowing it, just because the rules are different in Projectland. So I created a course after working with companies all over the world, big and small, old and new, to help give away all my secrets that I've learned over the past 20 years to help people navigate Projectland. And that's the signature course at projectgurucourse.com, where people can learn more and they can apply for it. And if they apply, they'll also get to a video where I explain more about Projectland and how to be successful in it. And if they apply, we can contact them back and talk about what might be the best fit for them, whether that course or something else we do.
Okay. Who do you suggest take the course that you offer?
Well, a lot of people take it who are new to projectland or are the person who's an expert at something other than project management and being asked to run a project. So, maybe they're an expert at finance or HR or healthcare, like you were describing, and now they're being asked to run projects in addition to their day job. Because this course is only 2 hours live virtual session a week for 8 weeks. So if you have time for Netflix, you have time for this. So it's been designed for the busy professional. And and it's really great to learn from each other, from the people in the class learn from each other, and they certainly also learn from the course.
Okay. So it's not a straight online course. It's a live, interactive,
it is
like
right
a teleconference, webinar.
Great. You do it over Zoom. Yes.
Okay. You said it's 2 hours a week for 8 weeks?
That's right. And they get a certificate at the end, which looks beautiful on their LinkedIn profile or resume.
So what's the certificate say on it?
Practical Project Management.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It's the Practical Project Management Certificate. So
okay, that they completed the course.
That's right.
Sounds great. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So they should just, again, go to the website, go to projectgurucourse.com, correct?
Perfect.
Wonderful. And your next class starts when?
January.
Okay. Sounds good. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. So any specific tips, this is our last segment, and or examples that you would like to share with us of how maybe even somebody could move through a crisis? I'd be interested in talking about that. I think that will help a lot of individuals.
We're in crisis mode now, so this is definitely a high time to talk about it. And I believe if you are a leader in a leadership position like your friend, or if you want to be seen as a leader, maybe an upcoming leader, the biggest thing that you can do when faced in a crisis is how you respond immediately. So the thing not to do is start screaming like in a horror movie, right? The equivalent in the workplace is to panic and show visible panic. So I simulate this in some of the workshops I run because project managers are always faced with risks and issues. It's just the way projectland works. So we set up these things and help them understand, in practice, how to respond to risks and issues. And we put them through this exercise, and this one lady, she was a very seasoned person. She had been around the block. And her initial response was to wave her arms, physically wave her arms above her head, be very agitated, and her voice went up an octave, and she said, everything is falling apart. So the good news was this was in training, right? This is not how we want to react. So when faced with a crisis, the first thing to do is stay calm, appear to be in control of yourself and your own emotions, even if on the inside you might be freaking out a little bit, and then quickly assess the situation, make a plan in your mind. There's that word plan again. And then be decisive and do the next right thing. Because you can always make another decision later.
Right. No, that's a good point. That's a very good point. This whole thing of planning, again, kind of anticipating. A good leader anticipates some things that can happen, right? And they try to make a plan, and then those things that we can't anticipate, perhaps the plans that we've created in our mind for other crises might actually pertain, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, in projects we call it risk planning because there are always expected and unexpected risks that happen on projects. So it's about, having a plan for anything that might arise because risks happen and issues happen. So what's your plan for how you're going to manage a risk that you didn't see coming? And so if you talk about that and when everything's calm and feeling good, then you'll be in a much better place later. So, organizations have fire drills. They have fire drills so that everybody knows what to do when a fire, and hopefully never, but if a fire were to happen, they know what to do.
That's a good point. Yes, they do. And I know just being credentialed for the mental health program I run, all the credentialing agencies, most of what they put emphasis on is planning ahead, having protocols and planning ahead. So that's a good point. I am sorry we have to end this conversation. Our show is just about over. Dawn Mahan is, again, very well sought after consultant, so I would suggest you contact her. What's the best way for individuals to reach you, Dawn?
My email address is my first initial, DMAHAN at PMOtraining.com. That's DMAHAN at PMOtraining.com. But also, go to projectgurucourse.com, check it out, and apply, and you'll be able to speak with me through the process. I'd love to help.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, for being on my show. I really appreciate your insights and your direction, and you have a great day.
You too. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dawn. Bye-bye. And to my listeners, I'll see you next month.